Some nights, it is not noise that keeps you awake, but the quiet weight of what will not leave your heart. Letting go can feel less like peace and more like losing the last thread that still joins you to what you loved, feared, or never finished. And so you lie here with this soft and difficult question beside you. If you loosen your grip, what will remain? Welcome to the quiet mind. This is a place for peaceful thoughts and quiet wisdom at the end of the day. Here, nothing is rushed, and even the heaviest feelings are allowed to grow soft enough for sleep. Perhaps something followed you into this night. Perhaps it was a memory, or a name, or a mistake that still carries heat inside it. Perhaps it was not one thing at all, but the slow ache of carrying too much for too long. Some people arrive at a night like this because they miss someone. Some because they are tired of being who they had to become. Some because life changed shape and never asked for permission first. And some simply because the heart does not always know how to put the day down when the day is over. If that is where you are tonight, you do not need to explain yourself here. You do not need to sort the whole story into clean pieces. You do not need to decide whether your pain is large enough, worthy enough, reasonable enough. You are here, and that is enough. There is already so much tenderness in the simple truth that you are still here, still feeling, still trying to make peace with what life has placed in your hands. Letting go is one of those phrases that sounds simple until it reaches a real human life. It sounds neat from far away. It sounds almost clean. But when it comes close, when it enters the private rooms of memory and hope and regret, it becomes something far more tender. Because letting go is not only about release, it is also about love. It is about fear. It is about the strange way the mind can wrap itself around what has already passed. Not because it enjoys suffering, but because holding on can feel like the last remaining form of devotion. Sometimes, what you hold is not a person. Sometimes it is a season of your life, a future you once imagined, a version of yourself that felt more whole, more innocent, more certain. And so the heart resists. It resists not because it is broken, but because it understands that some things matter deeply. To let go of them can feel almost disrespectful. It can feel as if you are shrinking what was once sacred. It can feel as if you are allowing time to erase something that deserved to stay bright forever. But perhaps that is not what letting go really is. Perhaps letting go is not erasure. Perhaps it is not betrayal either. Perhaps it is the moment when your hands, tired from gripping too tightly, begin to learn another way of touching what they cannot keep. There is a difference between dropping something and setting it down. There is a difference between forgetting and no longer fighting what cannot return unchanged. There is a difference between no longer carrying something every minute and no longer loving it. The heart often confuses these things because the heart is earnest. The heart would rather hurt than risk becoming cold. Yet rest does not ask you to become cold. Sleep does not ask you to become indifferent. Peace does not ask you to deny what was real. It only asks whether, for this one night, you might let what is heavy be held a little more gently. You may have noticed that what keeps a person awake is often not the event itself, but the invisible grip around it. The event may be over. The conversation may be long gone. The goodbye may have happened years ago. The mistake may belong to another version of you entirely. And still, Something in the mind circles. It revisits. It touches the same sharp edge. It asks the same old question in slightly different words. What if I had said something else? What if I had stayed? What if I had left sooner? What if I had understood? What if they had understood? What if life had been kinder? What if I had been kinder? There is such a lonely repetition in these questions because they often arrive after the rest of the world has gone quiet. During the day, there are tasks and voices and screens and movement. At night, there is only the heart and its private inventory. The heart opens its drawers. It takes out what it has hidden. It holds each thing up to the dim light of wakefulness and wonders whether now, finally, it can be made different. Often, when a person cannot let go, it is not because they are weak. It is because they have given the thing they carry a meaning so deep that release seems dangerous. Holding on can mean, this mattered. Holding on can mean, I was there. Holding on can mean, I did not imagine it. Holding on can mean, I still care. And sometimes, most quietly of all, holding on can mean, if I stop carrying this, I do not know who I will be without it. That last one is especially tender, because pain can become familiar. It can become part of the shape of a life. It can sit beside a person for so long that even though it hurts, it also feels known. And what is known, even when painful, can seem safer than the wide uncertainty that comes after release. So the mind does not only cling to what was lost, it clings to the identity formed around the loss. It clings to the old role, the old wound, the old unfinished sentence. It clings because to unclench is to enter a room without furniture, a room where something important once lived. There is an old image from the Buddha about grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else, only to find that you are the one being burned. It is a simple image, almost too simple at first. But maybe tonight, it can be held more softly, not as a lesson in cold detachment, and not as a judgment against your tenderness, but as a quiet way of understanding what happens when pain stays in the hand long after the fire itself has changed. The coal may be anger, it may be grief, it may be blame or longing, or the ache of one moment that keeps replaying. The strange thing is that the hand begins to forget what it is like not to hold it. The heat becomes familiar. The weight becomes identity. And so the suffering is not only in the original hurt, but in the continued gripping. This does not mean your attachment was foolish. It means your attachment was human. It means you loved, or hoped, or believed, or tried. It means your heart reached outward once, and now still trembles around the place where it cannot quite close. It is important to say this gently, because harsh truth does not help a tired mind rest. A weary heart does not need to be corrected. It needs to be understood. So perhaps you can simply notice, without blame, how much effort it takes to keep holding what hurts. Notice how the body tightens around certain thoughts. Notice how a memory can arrive and the chest shifts almost before language does. Notice how some names make the breath shallower, how some regrets make the jaw harden, how some unlived futures make the room feel smaller for a moment. This is not failure. This is what it looks like when the body remembers what the day tried to distract from. The body is faithful. The body keeps records. It keeps them in the shoulders, in the throat, in the stomach, in the eyes that do not fully close. And sometimes what a person calls overthinking is simply the body asking for permission to stop bracing against what already happened. There are nights when the thing you cannot let go of is clearly visible. You know exactly what it is. You can name it in a single sentence. But there are other nights when it arrives in pieces. It arrives as a restlessness without a clear face. It arrives as a sadness with no single source. It arrives as a feeling that something in you is still leaning toward a door that has already closed. You may not even know what you are reaching for, only that some part of you is still reaching. This too is part of being human. We are not always transparent to ourselves. The mind is not a bright room with every object in view. It is a house with hidden corners, quiet stairs, doors that open years later. A feeling can live in one room while its cause remains somewhere else entirely. So if your heart feels heavy tonight without a neat explanation, that does not make it false. It only means you are deep and living and still discovering what has been carried inside you longer than you knew. Sometimes letting go begins not with a decision, but with a question asked in a softer voice. Not, how do I get rid of this? Because the heart will resist that language. Not, why am I still like this? Because shame only tightens the knot. But perhaps a gentler question. What am I trying to protect by holding on? What am I afraid will vanish if I rest my hand for a while? What does this pain promise me, even as it drains me? There can be surprising answers. Sometimes pain promises loyalty. Sometimes it promises memory. Sometimes it promises that one day you will finally understand. Sometimes it promises that as long as you hurt, the story is still alive and has not yet been forced into the past. These are intimate promises. No wonder the heart hesitates. No wonder release can feel almost like treason. Yet a promise can be sincere and still too costly. A person can remain devoted to what mattered without carrying it in the most exhausting way. You may have loved something that did not last. You may have trusted something that changed. You may have built your inner life around an expectation that life quietly dissolved. And maybe the deepest pain is not only that it ended, but that part of you never received a proper ending. Some things conclude in the world, but not inside the heart. There is no final conversation, no perfect apology, no clear reason, no ceremony that says, this chapter may now close in peace. Instead, there is only ordinary time, continuing as if nothing sacred has cracked. The dishes still need washing. Messages still arrive. Other people move on too quickly. The sky looks almost rude in its normalness, and the part of you that was altered is left to carry a kind of invisible aftermath. That is one reason night can feel so tender. Night does not demand performance. Night admits what the day cannot hold. Night lets the unfinished things sit on the edge of the bed and breathe. Maybe this is why letting go is rarely one moment. It is often many moments. One night you loosen one finger. Another night you can only stop gripping for a breath. Some mornings you wake and feel lighter for reasons you cannot explain. Some evenings, the old ache returns as if nothing has changed. This does not mean you are back at the beginning. The heart does not move in straight lines. It moves like weather. It moves like tides. It circles what matters. It returns, then releases, then returns again more gently. Many people suffer because they expect themselves to arrive at peace in a single brave gesture, but most real peace enters quietly. It enters through repetition, through permission, through the slow discovery that what once felt impossible to set down can be placed for a few moments at a time, somewhere beside you, instead of inside your clenched hands. And there is something else. Sometimes what you cannot let go of is not the past itself, but your version of yourself inside that past. You may miss who you were before the loss, before the betrayal, before the illness, before the mistake, before the year that changed everything. You may grieve an innocence that no one else noticed. Leaving. You may grieve the person who believed more easily, laughed more freely, trusted more naturally, or expected life to make a little more sense than it did. This kind of grief is very quiet because it has no obvious object. There is no one to write to, no ritual widely known for it, yet it can be one of the most persistent forms of holding on. Not because you want to go backward exactly, but because you still love the person you were. You still want to protect them. You still want to tell them they deserved gentleness. You still wish they had been spared what came next. If that is part of what you carry tonight, perhaps you can do something very small and very kind. Perhaps you can stop arguing with the fact that you have changed. Change does not always arrive as growth in the way people like to describe it. Sometimes change arrives as narrowing, sometimes as fatigue, sometimes as caution, sometimes as a wisdom you never wanted to earn. And still, even in these harder forms, change is not only theft, it is also evidence that you remained alive through what would have otherwise flattened you. The person you were is not gone in the cruel way the mind sometimes fears. They are within you, quieter perhaps, altered perhaps, but not erased. Letting go of who you used to be does not mean abandoning them. It may mean gathering them into who you are now, with more tenderness, not less. It may mean saying, "You do not need to keep standing guard at that old doorway. I can carry us from here." When regret enters the room, letting go becomes even more complicated. Because regret does not simply say, "This hurt." It says, "This could have been otherwise." It offers alternate histories in endless supply. It is one of the mind's most persuasive arts. It can take a single hour from years ago and polish it until it shines with unbearable importance. It can convince you that if only one word had changed, one choice, one silence, one delay, everything else would have unfolded differently. There is such pain in that thought because it keeps the heart facing backward with its hands still outstretched. Regret is not always wrong. Sometimes it is the honest recognition that you were not at your best. Sometimes it is the sober knowledge that harm was done, or that fear cost you something precious. Yet even true regret can become a place of exile if you live there too long. A lesson can guide you. A verdict can imprison you. The night does not need another prison. Marcus Aurelius, who spent his life close to power and duty and death, often reminded himself that much of what fills our lives is borrowed. The people we love are borrowed. The roles we inhabit are borrowed. The seasons of ease are borrowed. Even the body, in time, is borrowed. He did not say this to make life feel cold or empty. He said it, perhaps, to help the heart love with honesty, to love while knowing that not everything can be owned, to care without pretending permanence where there is none. There is a strange peace in this thought when it is received slowly. Not everything that leaves has been stolen. Some things were always passing through. Some things were entrusted for a while, and the beauty was in the while. This does not erase grief. It only changes its shape. It means you are not asked to deny your sorrow. You are only invited to see that sorrow is part of what happens when finite hands hold something real for as long as they can. If much of life is given on loan, then perhaps some of your pain tonight comes from treating what was temporary as if it was meant to remain exactly as it was. This is not a criticism. Almost every human heart does this. We build our lives as though the current arrangement has a secret promise of staying. We assume the voice will still call tomorrow. We assume the home will feel like home forever. We assume the body will continue its familiar work. We assume the friendship will not thin. We assume the season of certainty will not end. And then life, being life, alters the arrangement. Something shifts, someone leaves. Time moves in its quiet and unstoppable way. The mind protests because it mistook presence for guarantee. That protest is full of innocence. It deserves compassion, yet it also deserves relief. Because to spend your nights demanding permanence from a world built of passing moments is a very exhausting way to love. There is another kind of regret that hides beneath the obvious one. It is not only regret for what happened, it is regret for what cannot now be repaired. This can be especially painful when the person you would speak to is unavailable to hear you, or when the life that might have held your better choice no longer exists. You may wish to go back and be kinder, clearer, braver, more honest, more patient. You may wish to explain yourself to someone who will never again stand in front of you. You may wish to reach into the past and place a hand on your own shoulder before you made the turn you made. There is such helplessness in this. But helplessness is not the same as meaninglessness. The fact that you see more now matters. The tenderness you feel now matters. The remorse that keeps you awake may be painful, but it is also evidence that something in you has remained morally alive. A numb person does not ache this way. A careless person does not revisit the wound in search of truth. Your sorrow may not be able to rewrite the past, but it may still reveal the shape of your deeper values. So perhaps tonight, you do not need to force yourself to stop regretting. Perhaps you only need to let regret become more spacious, to let it be a teacher instead of a cell, to let it say, yes, there was a loss here. Yes, there was a failure here. Yes, there was a tenderness here that did not know how to act in time. And after hearing that, perhaps you can also let it say enough for one night. Memory can be honored without becoming a prison. You can keep faith with what matters without returning to the same inner courtroom every evening. There is no wisdom in sentencing yourself forever. There is no love in making your whole life kneel before one chapter. The past is serious, but it is not the only thing that is real. This breath is real too. This bed, this tired body, this night that asks so little from you except honesty and perhaps a little softness. As these thoughts settle, another layer may begin to stir, because what remains hardest to release is often not the event alone. It is the part of you that became organized around the event. It is the inner posture built in response to pain, the role adopted without meaning to, the old vow made in silence, the childlike conclusion drawn from one moment and carried forward into many others. Pain is rarely content to remain a memory. It tries to become a lens. It says, "Now I know how life works." It says, "Now I know what to expect from love." It says, "Now I know what kind of person I must be in order not to be hurt again." And if enough time passes, these conclusions stop feeling like conclusions. They start feeling like identity. A person may say, "I am just guarded," or "I am just difficult," or "I am just someone who ruins things," without realizing that these are often old survival strategies wearing the mask of self-knowledge. Carl Jung wrote that what is not made conscious comes to us as fate. In other words, what remains unseen within us does not simply disappear, it returns. It appears in the relationships we choose, in the fears we repeat, in the ways we pull away, in the ways we hold too tightly, in the stories we tell about ourselves when no one is listening. This idea can sound heavy if held too sharply, but tonight it can be received with gentleness. Perhaps there are parts of you still asking to be seen, not because they want attention, but because they are tired of working in the dark. The part that learned to expect abandonment, the part that still seeks permission, the part that believes it must earn tenderness, the part that clings to pain because pain at least feels familiar. None of these parts are enemies. They are tired guardians. They were shaped by moments when your life felt uncertain or unsafe or too large to understand. They did what they knew. This is why letting go can feel so confusing. Because sometimes what you are trying to release is also what once protected you. The vigilance that now exhausts you may have once kept you alert in a difficult home. The self-blame that now keeps you small may have once given you the illusion of control in a chaotic situation. The emotional distance that now brings loneliness may have once prevented a deeper injury. Even your attachment to certain sorrows may have served a purpose. It may have been a way of staying connected to a lost person, a way of refusing to let a violation become invisible, a way of ensuring that what happened would never be dismissed. When you understand this, compassion becomes possible. Instead of commanding yourself to change, you begin to notice how every knot in you was once an attempt at care. Awkward care, painful care, incomplete care, but care all the same. Silence at night has a way of revealing these hidden inner guardians. During the day, they operate beneath the surface. They shape your choices without speaking their names. But in the dark, with fewer distractions, they become easier to feel. You may notice an old tension rise when you imagine being misunderstood. You may feel a wave of sadness when you think of being left behind. You may sense how much of your life has been spent performing steadiness, while something in you longed to be held. These recognitions can be unsettling at first, yet they are also intimate gifts. To see the hidden room is already to open a window in it. To notice the old role is already to loosen its spell. You do not have to solve every buried thing tonight, but perhaps you can sit beside some small truth without turning away. Perhaps you can say to yourself, I see why this became part of me. I see why I still hold it. I see that what looks like stubborn pain may also be old loneliness, asking not to be abandoned once more. Beneath many forms of holding on, there is loneliness. Not always the loneliness of being physically alone. Sometimes the deeper loneliness of having carried something no one fully saw. The loneliness of surviving privately. The loneliness of learning not to need too much because too much once felt dangerous. The loneliness of feeling changed by an experience that the world moved past too quickly. There is a unique sadness in unwitnessed pain. When suffering has no audience, no language shared widely enough, it can feel as though it floats around the life without a home. Then the mind returns to it again and again, perhaps because repetition is its way of trying to witness itself. The heart says, let me tell it one more time. Let me go back there once more. Let me prove that it happened, that it mattered, that I was there. This is a very tender instinct. It deserves a great deal of mercy. You may know the feeling of carrying a goodbye that no one else understands. A goodbye that did not happen at an airport or a bedside or a door, but slowly, invisibly, over months or years. A goodbye to a relationship that faded without explanation. A goodbye to trust. A goodbye to a dream. A goodbye to health. A goodbye to the kind of family you hoped you would have. These departures often leave very little behind except an interior echo. There are no flowers for them, no proper rituals, no shared language strong enough to name how much of a life can be shaped by what quietly stopped being possible. And so you keep holding the echo. You listen to it at strange hours. You treat it with the seriousness the world did not offer. In this sense, holding on is not always about refusal. Sometimes it is about making a private memorial where no public one exists. This is one of the soft truths about the human heart. It does not only cling out of fear, it also clings out of reverence. It holds on because something in it knows that what happened was not small. It holds on because love leaves traces, and not all traces are meant to vanish quickly. You may still carry the shape of someone's laughter, the feeling of a hand once held, the version of yourself that appeared around another person and has not appeared in quite the same way since. You may still carry a room, a season, a conversation, a day of terrible clarity, a day of unexpected kindness. These inner relics do not make you weak, they make you human. A life without trace would not be a peaceful life. It would be an untouched one. And untouched is not what you are. You have lived. You have been altered. You have loved enough to be changed by contact. Still, there comes a point when reverence and exhaustion begin to meet. The heart says, this matters. The body says, I am tired. The memory says, do not leave me. The night says, you can rest now. And perhaps true letting go begins in this exact meeting place. Not when one voice defeats the others, but when all of them are heard. When the heart is allowed to honor what matters. When the body is allowed to admit its fatigue. when the memory is assured that rest is not abandonment, when the night is trusted enough to hold what you cannot carry consciously until morning, there is no cruelty in this. There is a deep and quiet kindness in it. You do not have to drag every meaningful thing through every hour of your life in order to prove its worth. Sometimes the most loving act is to place what is precious in a gentler room within you and stop making it stand in the harsh light of constant examination. Lao Tzu spoke often in images so simple they almost disappear when first heard. Water, empty space, the unforced path, the usefulness of what does not insist. He understood something many of us spend years forgetting. Softness is not weakness. Water yields, and yet it shapes stone. Empty space seems like nothing, and yet it is what makes a cup able to hold tea, what makes a room able to be lived in. There is comfort in this tonight, because you may have believed that if you stop forcing, you are failing. If you stop pressing for answers, you are careless. If you loosen your emotional grip, you are unfaithful. But perhaps the opposite is sometimes true. Perhaps the force itself is what keeps the pain rigid. Perhaps softness is what allows a new shape to emerge. Perhaps what has become unbearable in your hands can become bearable once it is allowed to rest in the wider space of your life instead of the center of your struggle. Imagine what it would mean to be less like a fist and more like water. Not for all of life at once, just for this night. Water does not deny the stone in its path. It does not argue with the shape of the riverbank. It does not call itself defeated because it cannot go in a straight line. It moves around, it receives, it continues. There is an immense dignity in this kind of softness. It is not passivity, it is not collapse. It is a wise refusal to injure oneself by fighting every shape reality takes. If something has ended, water does not demand that it resume. If something has changed, water does not hold a trial against time. It responds. It adapts. It remains itself while taking the shape of what is real. Perhaps there is something in you tonight that longs for this kind of freedom. Not the freedom of never having loved, never having lost, never having hoped, but the freedom of no longer having to bruise yourself against what cannot become other than it is. There is also a tender loneliness in letting go that deserves to be spoken aloud. Sometimes release happens quietly, and no one sees it. No one knows that tonight is the night you stop rereading old meanings into an old silence. No one knows that tonight is the night you stop waiting for the apology that never came. No one knows that tonight is the night you decide to love someone without requiring them to return to who they once were. Some of the greatest acts of the heart are entirely invisible. There are no witnesses when you choose not to chase the same answer again. There are no candles lit when you finally stop bargaining with the past. There is no applause when you look at a sorrow and say, "You may stay in my story, but you may no longer command all of my strength." Yet these hidden moments matter. Perhaps they are among the most sacred moments of all, because they happen without performance. They happen in silence. They happen where truth is most honest. You may have had to love in ways that were never simple. You may have loved someone who could not stay, someone who changed, someone who hurt you, someone who simply remained human in ways your hope could not foresee. You may have loved a life that could not continue. You may have loved your own younger expectations more than you realized. And in all of this, one difficult beauty remains. Love does not become false merely because it becomes impossible in its old form. Some loves are not meant to continue as closeness. Some hopes are not meant to continue as plans. Some identities are not meant to continue as homes. Yet what was sincere in them can still remain sincere. Letting go does not accuse the past of being meaningless. It only accepts that meaning cannot always take the form you once prayed it would. There is grief in that acceptance, but there is also peace beginning to form at its edges. Peace does not usually burst in. It gathers. It gathers in the spaces where the mind gives up one small argument. It gathers when you stop demanding that sorrow justify itself through endless repetition. It gathers when you understand that pain does not have to vanish before rest becomes possible. A person can be sorrowful and peaceful at the same time. This is one of the more beautiful truths that adulthood slowly teaches. You do not have to choose between honesty and calm. You do not have to deny the wound to loosen your shoulders. You do not have to win against grief to sleep. Peace is not the absence of every ache. Very often it is the presence of enough gentleness around the ache that the ache no longer has to shout. There is a quiet dignity in carrying pain without turning against life. Not because life has always been fair, and not because every loss hides an obvious gift, but because bitterness is such a hard bed to lie in. It keeps the spirit alert in all the wrong ways. It sharpens the mind around old injuries until even innocent things begin to feel suspect. And yet there are many people who, without becoming naive, slowly choose a different relation to suffering. Not triumph, not denial. Something quieter. A way of continuing to meet the world without closing completely. Viktor Frankl, writing from depths of suffering most of us can scarcely imagine, said that even when much has been taken, a final inner freedom remains in how one bears what cannot be undone. This is not a glamorous thought. It is not grand. It is actually very intimate. It suggests that somewhere within the most exhausted human being, there remains a small and incorruptible space where meaning can still flicker. Meaning is often misunderstood. People hear the word and imagine a neat explanation, a reason that justifies everything, a bright sentence that removes the sting. But often meaning is much smaller and more humane than that. Meaning may be the way your pain made you gentler with other people. Meaning may be the honesty that grew in you after illusion broke. Meaning may be the way you learned to cherish ordinary tenderness because you now understand how brief it is. Meaning may be the dignity of having endured without becoming cruel. Meaning may be simply this: that your suffering did not have the last word on who you became. You do not have to turn every wound into a lesson. Some wounds remain mysterious. Some never close neatly. But even then, the way you hold them can carry a kind of moral beauty. The way you refuse to let pain make you smaller inside can matter deeply, even if no one else ever sees it. Perhaps one of the gentlest thoughts for tonight is that not everything unfinished must be finished before you rest. There are questions that may remain open for years. There are feelings that fade in spirals rather than straight lines. There are people you may never fully understand, including former versions of yourself. There are losses that become more companion than enemy, sitting quietly in the corner of life without ever fully leaving. This is not failure. It is simply the texture of being human in time. We are not creatures built only for solved things. We are also built for ambiguity, for memory, for partial understanding, for the long and quiet companionship of mysteries that never become fully clear. Sleep does not require closure in the dramatic sense. It only asks whether the mind can stop chasing certainty long enough for the body to sink. There is relief in loosening your demand that life give back what it has already changed. This demand is understandable. It comes from love, from shock, from innocence, from the part of you that believed goodness would protect certain things from ending. But life is not arranged around our readiness. It changes while we are still asking for more time. It closes doors while the heart is still walking toward them. It matures us through losses we never volunteered for. If you have been pleading inwardly for the old arrangement to return, perhaps you can hear how tired that plea has become. Perhaps you can hear how faithfully it has served your longing, and how merciful it might be now to let it rest, not because your longing was childish, but because longing too deserves sleep. At this point in the night, something in you may be softening in a new way. Not because every hurt has been named, but because the pressure to resolve it may be easing. This is often how deep calm first arrives, not as an answer, but as a lessening of insistence. The mind steps back a little from its own edge. The body notices the mattress again. The breath, without being commanded, begins to deepen by a small amount. There is still sadness perhaps, still tenderness, still a trace of old ache moving quietly through the chest. But now it is held in a larger silence, held in something wider than the ache itself. This widening matters. Many forms of suffering become unbearable only when they are mistaken for the whole sky. Once they are allowed to be one cloud passing through a much larger night, they begin to move differently inside you. Impermanence can sound frightening when first considered. The mind hears that everything changes and imagines loss. But there is another way to receive it. If everything changes, then the feeling in you now is changing too. If nothing remains fixed, then this heaviness is not permanent in the form it has tonight. Even what feels welded to the self has movement in it. Grief shifts, identity shifts, desire shifts, fear shifts. The body you have now is not the body of your childhood. The mind you have now is not the mind of your first heartbreak. The sorrow you carry may be old, but even old sorrow has weather in it. Some days it rains harder. Some days it becomes mist. Some days it rests almost invisibly on the skin. To remember impermanence is not to make light of pain. It is to remember that no feeling, however convincing, has the authority to define eternity. There is a hidden kindness in this. If joy did not pass, it might become invisible to us. If youth did not pass, we might not recognize its glow. If a season did not end, we might not understand the grace of having lived inside it at all. The same truth, though more difficult, applies to pain. Pain does not stay in one shape forever. Even the most faithful ache changes texture over the years. The raw wound becomes memory. The memory becomes quiet knowledge. The knowledge becomes a more spacious tenderness. One day you may realize that what once felt like fire now feels like warmth around a scar. Another day you may find that something you thought you would always carry in the same way has become lighter without announcing its departure. Time does this quietly. It loosens knots while you are looking elsewhere. It lowers the volume of old storms. It teaches the heart how to survive in ways the heart could not have imagined while the weather was at its worst. Alan Watts once used the image of muddy water becoming clear when left alone. It is such a restful image because it removes the pressure to fix oneself through force. When water is stirred, the mud stays suspended. The more frantic the movement, the less clear the water becomes. But when the water is left to settle, clarity arrives by its own nature. Perhaps the mind is often like this. Perhaps the harder you push at a thought, the more it spreads through the whole inner world. Perhaps the more urgently you try to stop feeling, the more alive the feeling becomes. This does not mean you should never reflect. It only means not every disturbance yields to effort. Some things become clear precisely when they are no longer chased. Some inner tangles loosen only when given stillness. Some nights are healed a little not by solving, but by ceasing to stir the waters quite so much. What if, just for this night, you let the water settle? Not forever, not as a life philosophy you must perfect, only as a temporary kindness. What if you did not wrestle every thought to the ground? What if you did not answer every accusation memory brings? What if you did not follow every path regret offers? What if you allowed the mind to say its piece without believing you must make a final ruling before dawn? Thoughts can rise without being obeyed. Feelings can move through without becoming commands. A memory can visit without being invited to stay and explain itself for hours. The room can be quiet enough for that. The heart can be quiet enough for that too, even if only a little. You are not required to force peace. Peace often arrives more readily when it is no longer being interrogated. Many people do not realize how exhausting inner force can be until they briefly stop applying it. The effort to remain braced, the effort to monitor, the effort to control what cannot be controlled, the effort to make sure no feeling grows too large, no memory becomes too strong, no sadness fully opens. This effort can feel so normal that it becomes invisible. But when it loosens, even for a few breaths, the whole being notices. The bed feels more supportive, the face softens, the hands become less expressive in their tension. The body, which has been waiting patiently for the mind to stop issuing so many alarms, begins at last to believe that maybe rest is possible. Not because every problem has vanished, but because the war against the existence of the problem has paused. That pause is precious. It is more healing than it appears. Perhaps letting go is not something you do to your heart. Perhaps it is something you allow your heart to discover. A hand that has gripped for a long time does not always open on command. Sometimes it opens because it is warm enough, safe enough, tired enough, understood enough. Your own inner life may be like that tonight. The part of you still holding the old coal, the old letter, the old version of events may not need instruction so much as compassion. It may need to hear, you do not have to prove anything right now. You do not have to keep the story alive by suffering in the same old way. You do not have to remain on guard in order to honor what happened. You are allowed to rest your hand and still remain true to what mattered. This is a very quiet permission, but quiet permissions often change a life more deeply than loud conclusions ever could. There is also a sweetness in remembering that rest is not a moral reward. You do not have to earn sleep by achieving emotional perfection. You do not have to become enlightened by midnight. You do not have to understand every pattern, forgive every hurt, bless every ending, and transcend every regret before your body is allowed to soften. Human beings are not machines that shut down only when every task is complete. Human beings are creatures of need, rhythm, fatigue, and tenderness. Sometimes the mind believes it must finish the whole emotional work before surrendering to sleep, but that belief is often just another form of fear. The work can continue tomorrow in gentler ways. Wisdom does not vanish because you paused. What matters remains. What needs further understanding will still be there. You can let this night be incomplete. Incompletion is not your enemy. It is one of the most ordinary truths of a living life. Maybe there are things you still need to say, though not tonight in words. Maybe there are apologies still forming in the heart, though no longer useful as speeches. Maybe there are old selves in you that still ache to be comforted. Maybe there are people you still miss in ways language cannot improve. Let all of that be true without making it all immediate. A beautiful thing about night is that it reduces the demand for action. In daylight, the mind believes it must plan, decide, revise, contact, explain, choose. But here, in this slower hour, you are permitted a simpler task: to breathe, to lie down, to be alive without performance, to feel the existence of your own body supported by something beneath it, to notice that the night does not ask for a resume of your worth. It does not ask what you solved today, whom you impressed, whether you became who you intended. It asks almost nothing. This almost nothing is a gift. If a memory rises now, perhaps you can greet it like a tired guest, not with fear and not with total surrender, just a quiet acknowledgement. Yes, I know you. Yes, you were important. Yes, you still carry feeling. But you do not need to speak all night. There is a way of turning toward inner things without entering into combat or collapse. It is a calm middle way. A person can notice sorrow without drowning in it. A person can allow longing without feeding it. A person can remember without reopening every wound with fresh fingers. This middle way is rarely dramatic. It is made of small tones, a softer internal voice, a longer breath, less argument, more room. If you can feel even the smallest hint of that room tonight, then something peaceful is already happening. And maybe what is most needed now is not another thought, but a new relationship to thought itself. Thoughts often arrive with great confidence. They announce themselves as facts, obligations, urgent messages, final verdicts. They say, "You must figure this out." They say, "You cannot rest until this is settled." They say, "Go back there again." But thoughts are not always wise just because they are loud inside a quiet room. Some are echoes, some are habits. Some are old alarm bells, continuing long after the fire has gone out. You do not have to believe each one simply because it knows your name. You can hear a thought and let it remain a thought. You can let it pass across the mind the way a bird passes across the sky. It may alter the shape of a moment, but it does not have to determine the weather of the whole night. There is great tenderness in realizing how much of your suffering has come from trying to protect yourself from suffering. The tighter the grip, the more strain in the hand, the more force used to prevent loss, the more deeply loss enters the body. The more urgently you demand certainty, the more fragile life feels when certainty does not arrive. And yet, none of this means your efforts were foolish. They were understandable. They were the efforts of a creature who loved and feared and hoped. They were the efforts of someone trying, in the only ways known at the time, to keep the world from breaking too much. If those efforts have become heavy now, perhaps they can be thanked and released a little, not all at once, but enough that your nervous system might feel the difference, enough that your breath might realize the night is not asking you to stand guard over every old wound. It is possible that part of what keeps you awake is not only pain, but vigilance. The body of someone who has known hurt can become watchful. It listens for repetition. It expects disturbance. It remains slightly prepared, even when lying down. This is one reason sleep can feel vulnerable. Sleep asks for surrender, and surrender has not always felt safe. If this speaks to something in you, let it be met with tenderness, not impatience. The watchfulness in you did not come from nowhere. It learned its work honestly. It stayed up for reasons. It scanned for danger, because danger once existed or seemed close enough to matter. To such a body, letting go can feel like negligence. So maybe instead of commanding sleep, you can offer reassurance. Nothing grand, just something quiet. You have watched enough for one day. You do not have to solve the dark before lying down inside it. You can let the night be night. A great deal of healing, though the word can sound too ambitious for a late hour, is simply the body learning that the present moment is not the same as the old one. The bed is not the battlefield. The room is not the argument. The silence now is not the same silence that once meant abandonment. The heart now is older than it was then. Wiser perhaps, even if more tired, more wounded perhaps, but also more capable of recognizing what is happening. Sometimes, letting go is this humble recognition. I am remembering something that is not fully happening now. I am bracing against a ghost. I am carrying yesterday's weather into a different sky. This is not said to shame the instinct. It is said to release it from unnecessary labor. The part of you that protects can be gently informed that not every quiet room hides the same old pain. There are nights when you may feel that if you truly stop holding on, something valuable will disappear. The memory will fade. The love will weaken. The lesson will be lost. The person will vanish from your inner life. But memory does not need clenched muscles to survive. Love does not require insomnia to prove itself. Meaning does not become truer because it is carried in the most painful way. Some of what mattered most in your life may rest in you most deeply when you stop forcing it into the center of every thought. What is truly yours in experience often settles into the soul more securely than the mind realizes. It becomes part of your tone, your choices, your tenderness, your caution, your humor, your silences, your mercy. You do not need to rehearse it constantly for it to remain part of you. In fact, what is deeply integrated often becomes quieter, not louder, Perhaps this is the difference between clutching and carrying. Clutching is all tension, all urgency, all fear of loss. Carrying can be gentle. Carrying can mean that something remains with you without requiring all of you. A person may carry a love for decades without living in constant ache. A person may carry grief without letting it sit at the head of the table. A person may carry regret as humility instead of self-punishment. A person may carry the past as texture, not as chains. This gentler carrying is not less sincere. It is often more mature, more merciful, more true to the full shape of a human life, because no life can remain forever at the pitch of acute feeling. To live long is to let intensity become depth. To grow older in spirit is to let what once burned brightly become a quieter light by which you move. If you notice your breathing now, you might feel that it already knows some of this wisdom. Breathing is a pattern of receiving and releasing. You do not call the exhale betrayal. You do not accuse the lungs of abandonment for not holding the air forever. They receive. They let go. They receive again. Life continues through this rhythm, not against it. Perhaps the heart, though slower to trust, is learning the same, to receive what came, to let go when holding becomes strain, to remain open enough for what life still has not yet brought. There is something deeply peaceful in realizing that release is built into life at every level. The leaves loosen from branches. Light leaves the afternoon. Childhood leaves the body. Summer leaves the field. The tide withdraws and returns. Breaths come and go. We live through thousands of tiny partings every day, most of them too ordinary to frighten us. Perhaps the larger partings also belong, however painfully, to the same ancient rhythm. And because they belong to that rhythm, they do not require the special violence of resistance in order to be honored. You can miss what is gone and still let the tide recede. You can feel the emptiness in the room and still not demand that it be immediately filled. You can admit that something mattered beyond words and still release your claim that it should have remained exactly as it was. This is not resignation in the dead sense. It is participation in reality with an open hand. An open hand may look vulnerable, but it is also the only hand capable of receiving new warmth. A closed fist can protect, yes, but it cannot be touched in the same way. Perhaps tonight the invitation is not to become endlessly open, but just a little less closed, just enough that the night air of peace can enter. There is something very beautiful about the moments before sleep when the mind begins, even unwillingly, to lose its sharp edges. Thoughts do not disappear all at once, but they become less solid. The old arguments lose some of their courtroom force. Images drift. Time becomes less strict. You may still feel the shape of what has burdened you, but the burden no longer stands so upright. It begins to recline. Perhaps this is one of sleep's quiet wisdoms. It reminds us that consciousness need not grip everything to remain itself. It can soften and still continue. It can release control and not vanish. It can trust the body to hold what the mind cannot keep watch over for every hour of the night. This trust is ancient. You inherited it long before you knew words for your fears. Somewhere inside you is a deeper intelligence than the anxious mind, and it knows how to descend toward rest You are allowed to trust that intelligence tonight, even if only a little, even if another part of you remains doubtful. Trust does not have to be absolute to be real. A small trust is still trust. The smallest trust might be this: I do not need to finish my whole life before morning. I do not need to solve my sorrow before sleep. I do not need to make perfect peace with every ending in order to rest this body. I can let the unfinished remain unfinished for a while. I can let the unknown remain unknown. I can let the heart hold what it holds without pressing it into harder shapes. This kind of trust is humble. It does not announce itself. It often feels more like giving up a struggle than winning one. But many good things begin that way. Many forms of grace enter precisely where force leaves off. Maybe tonight, you can think of letting go not as a dramatic release, but as making things lighter in the room of your mind. A chair pulled back, a window opened, a lamp turned low. The sorrow is still there, but it is not pressed against your face. The memory is still there, but it is seated quietly. The regret is still there, but it has stopped making speeches. In this gentler arrangement, you do not have to exile anything. You only rearrange the inner furniture so that your spirit has space to lie down. What a simple and merciful thought that is. You are not required to throw your inner life away. You are only invited to make room inside it for rest. Some feelings may remain for years, but they do not all need the same seat of honor. Some can sit farther back now. Some can whisper instead of shout. Some can wait until daylight if they still need to speak. The heart often fears that if it becomes peaceful, it will become less sincere. But peace is not insincerity. Peace is sometimes the deepest form of sincerity, because it admits reality without theatrical resistance. It says, yes, this mattered. Yes, this hurt. Yes, this changed me. And yes, I do not need to injure myself further in order to prove any of that. There is such maturity in this. Not the maturity of becoming distant, but the maturity of becoming gentle without becoming false. A child often thinks intensity is the purest sign of truth. An older soul begins to understand that steadiness can be just as true. A low flame can warm a room longer than a blaze. A quiet love can outlast a dramatic one. A settled grief can honor the dead more tenderly than endless collapse. The quieter your heart becomes, the less it is trying to convince anyone, even itself. It simply is. And maybe there is a final hidden fear in letting go, one that is rarely spoken plainly. The fear that if you stop carrying the weight, you will have to meet the emptiness beneath it. Weight can distract from emptiness. Struggle can fill the silence. Repetition can protect against the strange openness that appears when an old emotional occupation loosens. If so, be gentle with that too. Emptiness is not always a void. Sometimes it is space. Sometimes it is the first uncluttered room you have stood in for years. Sometimes it feels strange because the nervous system mistakes unfamiliar peace for absence. Yet space is what allows breath to deepen. Space is what allows new tenderness to enter. Space is what allows a tired mind to stop pressing against the walls of itself. You do not have to fill every silence with a thought. You do not have to fill every inner clearing with another task. Some space is meant to remain space. Some emptiness is where rest lives. So if the room inside you feels a little wider now, do not rush to occupy it with fresh worry. Let it stay open. Let the quiet be enough for a while. Let the fact that you are breathing be enough for a while. Let the body sink by degrees into the support already beneath it. Let your tongue rest in your mouth. Let your forehead be smooth if it wishes. Let the eyes rest in their darkness. None of this has to be performed. Nothing in you needs to impress the night. The night has seen every kind of human face. It has watched grief and love and confusion and relief pass through a million rooms. It is not startled by your tenderness. It is not disappointed by your unfinishedness. It receives tired people as they are. Perhaps that is why night can feel so honest. It removes the decorations. It leaves only what is living and human. If you still feel a little resistance, that is all right. Resistance often lingers even when peace is near. It is like a door that has been shut for years and does not swing open in silence. It creaks. It hesitates. It remembers its old purpose. Let it. You do not have to force even the letting go. You can let go of letting go as a project. You can simply rest beside the possibility of it. Perhaps tomorrow something will loosen more. Perhaps next week. Perhaps the softest part of this change will happen so slowly that you only recognize it later, when you notice that something which once ruled the night now merely visits it. Trust slow kindness. Trust the work done by ordinary hours. Trust the way repetition of gentleness can teach the body what harshness never could. Sleep itself is one of the great teachers of this. Every night, it says, you may release without disappearing. You may surrender and still remain. Somewhere in you, even now, there is a quieter self who does not need to argue so much. Not because this self knows everything, but because it no longer mistakes control for safety. This quieter self is not far away. It may be the part of you listening beneath the thoughts, the part that recognizes truth when it arrives in a calm voice, the part that feels relief not from certainty, but from permission, the part that knows, in ways words do not fully explain, that life cannot be lived with clenched hands forever. That part of you is wise. It may not feel impressive. It may even feel very ordinary, but ordinary wisdom is often the most trustworthy kind. It does not speak in slogans. It does not promise impossible freedom from pain. It simply places a gentle hand on the shoulder of the restless mind and says, "Enough for now." Enough for now can be a sacred sentence. Enough looking back for now. Enough asking the old question for now. Enough trying to make the past confess to a different shape for now. Enough carrying the whole story in the muscles for now. Enough mistaking vigilance for love for now. You are still a faithful keeper of what mattered, even if you stop rehearsing it through the night. You are still yourself, even if your sorrow is not actively speaking. You are still connected to what you have lost, even if your grip becomes kinder. So much of peace begins with this phrase, enough for now, not forever, just for now. It is modest enough to believe, gentle enough to receive, human enough to soothe. Soon, perhaps, the thoughts will begin to blur at their edges. The room will feel both near and far. Your body will feel heavier in the pleasant way. That means it is finally willing to belong to gravity again. If some final memory rises before sleep, let it rise lightly. If some sadness passes through, let it pass through without taking the whole bed with it. You do not need to deny anything. You only need to stop following every thread into wakefulness. Let some threads remain where they are. Let the loom of the mind rest. The cloth of your life will still be there in the morning. Nothing essential will be lost because you slept. In fact, some things are only woven properly when the conscious mind steps aside and the deeper rhythms continue their ancient work in darkness. Being human means loving and losing, remembering and resisting, hoping and adjusting, carrying and setting down. It means there will be nights when the heart is full of names, questions, regrets, and tender unfinished things. It means there will also be nights when these things grow lighter, not because they matter less, but because you are learning to hold them with more mercy. There is dignity in this, the dignity of a life that has felt deeply and still remained open enough to seek peace, the dignity of a heart that has been altered and is not ashamed of its marks, the dignity of someone who does not need a grand conclusion in order to rest. If you have made it this far into the night with your tenderness still intact, then something quietly noble has already taken place. So now, for this one night, you can set down what you have been carrying, not because it is trivial, because it is precious. Precious things are not always meant to be gripped. Sometimes they are meant to be placed carefully in the shelter of the heart and left there without constant handling. Let the names rest. Let the old scenes dim. Let the regret loosen its collar. Let the longing sit in a softer chair. Let the questions remain unanswered without standing at attention. Let the day loosen from your skin. Let your breath find its own slower wisdom. Let the darkness around you feel less like an emptiness and more like a quiet hand cupped around your tired mind. You do not have to disappear into sleep all at once. Sleep can come nearer in its own shy way. It can approach like a soft tide. It can arrive in fragments, in drifting thoughts, in the gentle loss of interest in finishing every sentence. Let that be enough. Let the mind dim kindly. Let the body be carried by what supports it. Let the heart know that nothing true will be destroyed by this rest. And if one last thought asks what remains when you loosen your grip, perhaps the answer is very simple. What remains is what was always deepest, not the strain, not the fear, not the endless rehearsal. What remains is the love itself, quieter now, the life itself, still here, and you held gently inside this night, growing lighter in the dark. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel for more stories.